We heard from President Trump in his tweet saying that all is well. We heard from Iran saying it's not looking for a war. Are we looking at a possible de-escalation?
I think we are. A couple of hours ago, I was worried that this would escalate, but I think the combination of the fact that it appears as if there are no American casualties is a positive element in an otherwise very complicated situation. Javad Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran, has indicated that they do not want to take this any further, that they want to de-escalate. And then the president's tweet, which also seems very encouraging, that things are not getting worse. If anything, it's a calming statement rather than an escalatory statement. So if the information we have now and the indications we have now hold, then there is a possibility, I think, a good one, of de-escalation. And presumably there are also contacts going on through the Swiss or some other country to clarify positions on both sides.
Is diplomacy at all possible, Bob, given that both sides have reacted, both sides have launched attacks?
Well, I think diplomacy is possible, probably not the type of diplomacy which would enable both sides to sit down at a negotiating table right away. But the diplomacy of the moment really has to be focused on avoiding escalation and moving the situation toward de-escalation. The U.S. has taken actions, the Iranians have taken actions, and now perhaps there can be a period of calm, some reflection. And I don't think either side really wants a war. The difficulty is that sometimes emotions get the best of people and they drift into war as a result of that. But I think if the president has made the decision not to go on TV tonight, that's a positive thing, and it means there is an opportunity for reflection, for communication, and probably when he speaks tomorrow, the odds are it will be de-escalation, maybe tough talk about what the U.S. would do or could do to Iran, but not a tough set of actions to back that talk up at this point.
Bob, it's Yvonne in Hong Kong. Are you surprised by Iran's attack this morning? A lot of the guests that we spoke to before a couple of days ago were saying that we were going to see more or less aggressive types of tactics from Iran, let's say proxy attacks or a cyber attack of some sort. But this was some type of attack that was focused more on military bases. So does that strike any kind of tone to you on what Iran can do next?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think the general thinking was that Iran would respond, but would take its time and do it in a way perhaps that couldn't be attributed to Iran directly, like actions through cyber, for instance. And I think also there was a feeling that maybe it would use Shia militias in other countries to take action in its behalf rather than do it on its own. But this is probably the fact that these ballistic missiles were apparently launched from Iran into Iraq is symbolic of the fact that Iran has demonstrated it has the capability of shooting off ballistic missiles, and most experts have known that. And it also demonstrates to the public in Iran, which was very supportive of General Soleimani, even people who didn't like the regime particularly were supportive of Soleimani. So I think the Iranians wanted to demonstrate to their own people that they were taking tough actions. But they also didn't want to kill Americans, because then the probability would be that President Trump would take action. So in this respect, they've shown that they can launch ballistic missiles. They came very close to these bases, but not areas where there were Americans. So presumably, from what we know, they didn't kill Americans, but they demonstrated to the people at home that they had taken tough action and they were capable of tough action. So don't mess with us anymore, but without triggering a war. And I think the President of the United States has concluded that he's not in a position where he has to respond because Americans were not killed. Now, I could be wrong, and tomorrow morning he could decide he wants to take tougher action. But it seems to me that if you read the tea leaves now, it looks more like de-escalation than setting the predicate for more escalation at the moment.
So perhaps more de-escalation. Does this mean that the Iran nuclear deal, can that be somewhat saved in some way?
I think that's a stretch at this point. The president's made a very strong point that he opposes the deal. The possibility of reinstituting the kind of negotiations that Foreign Minister Zarif and Secretary Kerry had, doing that in this administration is highly unlikely at this point. So I wouldn't hold my breath about resuming the nuclear conversations. But I do think that avoiding a military confrontation is probably the best we're going to get at this point. And I think at least that would be a positive step forward and maybe open the opportunity to more conversations, perhaps not directly, perhaps through the Swiss or the British or the French or others, and maybe setting up the prospect of at least some conversations about a somewhat less tense relationship than the kind we've had over the last couple of years anyway. But not moving back to the table on the nuclear issue, because I don't think that's possible at the moment, given this administration's view and the politics in general in this country.